I'm Jackie Schillinger. I'm the Manager of Government and Community Relations for the New York State Canal Corporation, and on behalf of the New York Power Authority and Canals, I'd like to thank you for joining us here this evening at Colgate University to learn more about our dam rehabilitation project. We're still a year plus away from the start of construction, and it's unusual to be communicating about a project that's still being designed. However, it's also unusual to be taking on a project that will likely be felt so much by the surrounding community. That's why we wanted to come out here as early as possible to tell you about what we do know about the project and how it will impact all of you so that nobody is surprised when the reservoir begins to lower beyond its usual depth and crews start mobilizing in 2026, sometime in the winter. As I said to Joe Dodd, who you'll hear from soon, we're giving everyone the greatest tool of all as we prepare to undertake this rehabilitation, and that is time to plan. The project will be disruptive. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's going to take some time to complete, and it will change, possibly, how you use the lake while it's taking place, and we're sensitive to all of that. But we'll go through it together, and once it's finished, you'll be able to count on a state-of-the-art dam adjacent to a beloved reservoir that's safe, sound, and operating as designed. It will provide for fewer disruptions when it comes to water levels during the spring and summer months, and it should remain that way for many years to come. But most importantly, it will protect all of the people and property below it. I hope we can all agree that the safety of our neighbors is always paramount. And to that end, I'd like to thank Mayor Lovelace and Supervisor Rauter for their partnership, as well as our state, county, and local emergency managers. They've all given us a lot of their time and shared their insight, and expertise as we discuss the project with them, and I'm sure we'll be spending many more hours together in the months to come. So, this is our first meeting. We'll have more. We haven't scheduled them yet, but as the project grows closer, we'll be coming back to meet all of you. We're recording this. We'll be posting it online in the coming days, so we'll share that with our community leaders once it's ready. And we're also hosting a virtual public information session, so we really want to make sure we touch as many people as we possibly can with this information, and that will be on Wednesday, August 14th. Details are forthcoming, so stay tuned for that. And that's the end of my spiel, so I'll turn it over to Joe Maloney, our Regional Director for the Eastern Region.
Thanks, Jackie. Just briefly, I just want to appreciate everybody being here. Many of you may remember, Jackie and myself and a handful of other colleagues. We were here 4.5 years ago, very early in the process, saying, we know there are issues with the dam. We're working on repairs. We've done a lot of work, and then COVID suddenly hit us. So everybody got thrown for a loop on planning and resources and moving things forward. But suffice to say, I think just reassure, we've not been resting on our laurels for these 4 years. We've done a lot of work. The consultant team that's here with us, Joe Dodd is from our project management team. We've put in a huge amount of effort behind the scenes the last 3 years, really aggressively looking at not just this reservoir, but a lot of the other accompanying reservoirs in the county. Again, I think as we promised 4 years ago, this one still remains at the top of our list in priorities and in schedule and in advancing it and moving it forward. It's the furthest along in the program. So we have been doing a lot of behind the scenes work. What is going to be presented tonight is that first glimpse of some of that work. We've had a lot of discussion of pros and cons and a lot of technical expertise go into why are we selecting a particular alternative or making particular recommendations, and that's still being refined as we go. But I just want to hopefully appreciate everybody being here. We will be back, as Jackie said, and I think our commitment from the Canal Corporation and Power Authority is we take public safety, dam safety right at the top of our priorities. It is very important to us. If there were any reason we felt the dam were not presently safe, we would be taking different actions, right? It is currently safe. It's many of the things we're designing and doing are about long-term life extension, protection from extreme events, and bringing it up to current modern engineering standards is a lot of what we're trying to address. So having said that, I don't want to bore you anymore. I think everybody wants to hear what Joe has to say, and we'll get, oh, yes, Supervisor and Mayor, if you have any words you'd like to share. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I won't speak that long, but I'm Greg Reuter. I'm the current supervisor for the town of Madison, and I'm very proud to represent the town of Madison, and I'll be the supervisor for another year, maybe longer if my constituents like what I've been doing. But I'm happy to say I've lived on Lake Moraine since 1974. It's an awesome place to live. And the dam is such a precious asset, again, to everyone there, because without the dam, we'd be out of luck. And so tonight's meeting, hopefully it's going to be a KISS meeting. And when I was in the Marine Corps, we had an old saying, keep it simple, stupid. So, but Joe's a great speaker. That's a heads up for Joe. And I'm going to be in the back of the room, and when I go like that, that's his sign. But like I said, I've loved the lake. I grew up here when I was a young guy in the high school here in Hamilton. And many of you did the same thing I did. We stayed local. And another person that I think loves the lake as much as I do is the current mayor of the village of Hamilton, Ruth Ann Lovelace. And she's been a lake resident for many years, and she loves the lake as much as I do. And she's also, I'm going to give her a big gung-ho here, she is the president of the New York State Mayors Association. And that's a crowning achievement, Ruth Ann. You've done a great job down here in the village of Hamilton. And one last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll sit down. How many people here from the village of Hamilton? Raise your hand, please. Good number. How many here are from Lake Moraine? Okay, great. That's easy for me. Anyone else? I mean, is there anyone else here that doesn't have anything to do with that? Good. Excellent. That's fine. Bradley Brook? Hatch Lake? Hatch Lake. Good place. All right. I'm all done, but I want Ruth Ann to come up here and speak for 2 minutes.
Thanks, Greg. That was very nice. I'm Ruth Ann Lovelace, the mayor of this wonderful village, and it's hard to believe that discussions of this project began over 5 years ago. It's a long time coming. It still has a few years to go, but we've all been involved. We've all been talking about it. It's important to all of us. I want to thank the Canal Corps for their persistence with this project and with their many ways of keeping us involved and informed, which has been critical. The fact that there was a public meeting 5 years ago and we have had many other meetings, smaller meetings since then and will continue to, is a real testament to them and their commitment to us and making sure that we're committed and involved in this as much as possible. As many of you have heard me talk, this is a very important project for the village of Hamilton. However, as Greg mentioned, I'm a past 20-year resident of Lake Moraine. It is very, very important to me. It's near and dear to my heart, and I do understand the impact that this kind of a project will have on all of you and all of us in the village. So I just want you to be aware of that, and as we go into this entire project. The village looks forward to working with everyone involved to help ensure that it is a very positive process and a very positive outcome for all of us. And so we look forward to a partnership that is critically important for an effort that is this large. And I'm delighted now to turn it over to Joe, who will talk more about it. But thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Supervisor Reuter. As I've already been introduced, my name is Joe Dodd. I'm serving as the project manager for Canal Corp and the Power Authority on this project. I don't live right here locally, but I'm not too far away in Madison County, just as a way of introduction. And it really is an honor, and it's humbling to work on, you know, some of these great projects and some of these old canal assets so close to home. I really take a lot of pride in that. But we'll dive right in here. So we've got a lot to cover, and kind of what's already been mentioned. There's been a lot of work that's been going on the past few years behind the scenes. We have progressed the project. Everything isn't finalized yet, but we're certainly at a point right now where we need to get out here. And this turnout is great. Greg, thank you for allowing us to get the lay of the land here. It's great to see people from the reservoir, from the lake, from the village, and other areas. But I encourage you to pay attention, think of questions. We've got our engineering team here. We've got others from Canals, and we really want to get some feedback from all of you tonight, and also tell you what you should begin to start thinking about, and how you should start possibly thinking about preparing for this project, because it is coming. So just to walk through our agenda here, we've already kind of done our welcome and introductions. We'll do a brief history lesson on the dam and really the Shenango Canal. We'll shift to where we are in current times, just give an overview of the dam. I'm going to then talk about why we're doing this project, the purpose and the need for it, why we're all here tonight, a little more detail on the rehab project that's coming. We'll touch on the schedule at a very, very high level. You know, we're still pretty far out, so we're really at a time we're just laying out some year milestones now. And then Jackie's going to give a brief public engagement update, and then we'll get to some Q&A. So why now? And my job's been made pretty easy here. I think we really heard from the mayor and the supervisor and from Joe and Jackie why we're here tonight. I think you guys all know too. But the first circle here, New York State Canal Corporation. Canal Corp is the owner of the dam, and we fully accept all responsibility for the structure. We're responsible to operate and maintain it, and we're responsible to ensure the safety of the structure for the people on the reservoir and everybody downstream. So it's our dam. What are we trying to get to? We'll touch on some of these points kind of throughout the presentation, but it comes down to a few things. A state of good repair. We're trying to get to this state of good repair with the dam. Resilience. You know, weather seems to be getting more extreme these days. We've all heard about it. So we're going for this higher level of resilience to provide for the dam. And in doing that, you know, we're going to reduce the risk that dams do pose, that any dam poses to the communities downstream. So risk reduction. And then just to really hammer it home, public safety is paramount here in this project. You'll hear me mention that a lot. And as we've heard from the supervisor and the mayor and others, we fully recognize that this dam and this reservoir really is a great asset for the community, and there's public benefit here. So these are some of our main themes for the project. Drilling in a little more where we're at, I guess, in funding this project. So back in May of this year, the governor, there was an announcement from the governor, and it was really exciting for us. And I'll just kind of read some tidbits from here, but she announced an additional $50 million investment in the state canal system. So we have our typical, you know, annual operating budget, we have our capital budget. This was an additional $50 million that we hadn't typically gotten. So this was a big deal for us. It's exciting for us because we have additional funding to take on some of these projects. Now, drilling into that press release, and I encourage everybody to go ahead and Google it. You'll find it quickly and read the whole thing. But the first bullet that was mentioned for projects that are slated to be funded through this $50 million, I'm just going to read it. Rehabilitation of reservoir dams built in the 19th and early 20th century to supply water to the enlarged canal, 1836, we'll hit that date again, and other canals being the Shenango Canal, being this reservoir. So I can tell you that this project, Madison Reservoir Dam Rehab, is a top priority, and it's going to be funded by this additional $50 million funding. I'm going to read a couple more quotes from the governor because I think they're pretty telling for how she feels about the canal system and how you all feel probably about Lake Moraine and the ties you may have. But the investment is to ensure the current Erie Canal and the entire canal system remains safe and a vibrant part of our state's fabric. This commitment of funding will allow our historic canal to be a part of New York's story for generations to come. So generations to come, you think of longevity of this asset. Jackie mentioned some of the hardship we're going to have in the meantime, but we're really forward looking here. and we're looking to the future. And we'll touch on the longevity theme here a little more. So I'm going to go through a brief kind of history lesson. I imagine most of you are probably already aware somewhat the history of the reservoir, but I think it's important just to kind of look back on why the dam was originally built and why we're here now today. So we'll get right into it. So the dam was constructed in 1836, almost 200 years ago. And it was constructed really as part of the Shenango Canal. The map at the bottom on my right side, it shows the canals across the state as they existed in the 1800s. So the success of the Erie Canal led the state to build these lateral canals that all connected to the Erie, because it was a successful thing back then. The dam was built, as most people are probably aware, as an impoundment of Payne Brook, and that was the source of the water to feed the canal. So the two drawings there are just actually original contract drawings that show when it was built the limits of the reservoir. So I'll walk through a couple photos here, but it's interesting as you go through the village, you see nods to the canal days of yesteryear kind of throughout. There's some murals here that we'll talk about in historical markers. But the Shenango Canal, it connected Utica and Binghamton, and Utica connected to the Erie Canal, and it allowed trade and commerce along that route. As I already mentioned, the reservoir served as a feeder to the canal until 1878 when the Shenango Canal closed. And it was one of 7 feeder reservoirs, you're probably aware of a lot of the other ones in the area, that fed the canal. So we'll look at the mural in the middle a little closer, but that's if you're walking out of the Hamilton Eatery, that's the mural right there. So this tells a lot, right? It tells you maybe what canal times were back in the 1800s, and I imagine this is a mural within the village, but in the upper left, and we'll take a closer look at this, it shows the topography that the canal had to overcome as it traversed from Utica to Binghamton. And I'm sure a lot of people have driven out of Utica. You climb up Route 12, you're climbing grade, and in order to do that, the canal had to be fed by reservoirs, and there are also, I think, on the order of 116 or 117 locks that the canal had to get boats up and down out of Utica and then back down to Binghamton. So the historical marker in the upper left here, that's actually in Bouckville, right by the Landmark Hotel. Most people have probably seen it, but it really kind of sums it up well. This 5-mile summit of the 97-mile canal extends from north of Hamilton to Salisville, receiving water from nearby reservoirs. And if you look closely at the very peak, this is a profile of the Shenango Canal. It shows the terrain that it traversed. That summit section between Bouckville and Hamilton is shown at the very peak there. So the purpose of this reservoir and the surrounding ones in the community was to feed this canal. And just a little bit more history, it was pretty unique. This was one of the first canals that was completely fed by a reservoir system. So fast forward, looking more now to modern day times. The reservoir, most people probably know, it no longer is used for canal operations at all. There is no Shenango Canal anymore. It closed in 1878. It does not feed the Erie Canal. Water flows out to Payne Brook and eventually makes it down here by Colgate to Taylor Pond and on its way to Shenango River. Again, we're responsible for maintaining the dam and the outflows from it, so we manage those seasonally to support recreational uses, really for public benefit. And we also manage the levels to conduct maintenance and do inspections, because this is a man-made structure. This is all obvious stuff. The reservoir now, it's very highly developed. There's seasonal, there's year-round residences, and it really kind of supports a microclimate or economy of lodging, dining, some businesses, and related accommodations. Just a little bit more on what it's used for now, right? So it's a public asset, an ecological asset. There's many different users of the reservoir, not just the folks that live on it, but it's very popular for fishing, boating, swimming, and other water sports, and obviously Colgate has an interest in it too. So I'm going to shift now to just an overview of the dam. Again, this is very, very high level. If you do want to learn more about it, I encourage you to talk to some of our engineers later in the Q&A or in the after session. So I'm just going to kind of hit the main features of it. So first off, this is an earthen embankment dam. And the dam was constructed with 2 embankments, just to get everyone oriented. The nomenclature I use when I say right embankment, you imagine yourself standing within the reservoir looking downstream. So you can see the right embankment labeled there, I guess, on your left side, and then the left embankment. So these 2 embankments were built, you know, back in the 1800s. They were built with soil, gravel, other materials, and they met at this natural hill in the middle, just adjacent to the spillway, possibly a moraine, and that's essentially what formed the dam. Starting from your left, I'm just going to kind of walk my way across. So the auxiliary spillway, that was the original spillway to the dam. It's made of stone and masonry, and prior to, I'll get to it, prior to the more modern vintage spillway that we have now, this was the only spillway that really served the dam. We have our low-level outlet system. So these are essentially, I like to call them the bathtub drains. They allow us to release water out of the reservoir to manage levels and also to perform our inspection and maintenance. So it's indicated there by the yellow dash line. Obviously, they're down below through the embankment. They go out to the reservoir, and they allow us to pass flow. They go to the valve house. We have controlling valves, 2 16-inch pipelines, and they allow us, right, again, to control water flow out of the reservoir. The service spillway, that's our big concrete spillway that was built in the 80s. We'll get to that. That allows us to pass flow from storm surges, a very important primary function of any dam. And then going over to the left, we have our left embankment. Just a few highlights on the pertinent data. This reservoir is fed by an 8 square mile watershed. Greg always reminds me, out of the reservoirs we have, it's one of the larger watersheds, and that's an important fact. And when we get to some of our control of water measures and our drawdown measures, that's really an important thing. At the highest point, the dam, I believe it's the left embankment, is 57 feet in height. And it's hard to wrap your head around some of the numbers I'm going to share now, but the volume, how much water is this holding back? It's a lot. So 176 million cubic feet. And to put that into gallons, it's over 1.3 billion gallons. So there's a lot of water in there. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone here. Just a little bit more on some of the primary features of the dam. Again, there's 2 earthen embankments. They total 1,400 feet together. The right embankment is 600 feet long. The left embankment is 800 feet long. Again, these are built from earth. The low-level outlet works, I talked a lot about them already, but we have an intake structure within the reservoir. There's 2 16-inch cast iron pipes that convey flow out, and then they're controlled at the brick valve house that you can see from the road. Right, so again, that allows us, we always pass flow through those pipes, because essentially the reservoir, it impounds Payne Brook. We have to keep flow going through Payne Brook. So that provides our minimum flow. We're always passing flow through there. We'll always be passing flow through there when we do get to the rehab project too. And right, an important part too, important function of the low-level outlets, in case of emergency, maintenance, inspection, it allows us to bring the reservoir down. The spillway, it's probably pretty obvious to most people, but it serves a very important function. We get a storm, we get a big flood. This allows us to safely pass that flow through our dam. Okay, so just some really interesting, our engineers got these views from drones. They're just really neat photos, probably perspectives you haven't seen. But this is, pretty obvious, standing, looking from within the reservoir, looking downstream towards Spillway Road. This is our main spillway. This is the old you know, original spillway, stone masonry. You can get some sense, and I'm sure some people have been up close to it. You can get some sense for the condition of it. And then this is our low-level outlet valve house. So just shifting now, to, you know, this dam is almost 200 years old. Dams are man-made structures. They require operation and maintenance. They require upgrades. They require repairs. This list is not by any means all-encompassing, but we just wanted to highlight some of the major points, I guess, in the history of the dam. So again, built in 1836, approaching 200 years old. In 1962, so fast forward, you know, over 100 years, there were new valves that were installed in that valve house on our low-level outlets. In 1983, was really our only major project. I saw some of the drawdown photos. That's awesome. I'm glad somebody brought those for that work. But that was our one and only really major rehab project to date on this dam. So that big concrete service spillway that was built during that project, there was some earthwork. The crest was raised and widened. And we'll touch on it briefly. There's an old stone masonry tunnel on the left embankment that was abandoned to some degree. Some of the recent improvements we've done, so kind of the 2010s to present, we've done some stabilization to that old valve house. It's in tough shape, but it's a historic, interesting structure. We've installed a lot of electrical and water level type monitoring devices that really give us a good real-time and remote look on the condition of the dam, and I'll touch on some of that. So it allows us really to see the water levels within the embankment of the dam. That's critical to understanding how your dam's performing, and then also the groundwater level, or I'm sorry, the water level within the reservoir. Recently, we did some repairs to the spillway back in March, and I'll get to that. But you know, you look at this, you consider how old the dam is. You look at the original, you know, title sheet for the contract drawing, and this is it right here, right? And it's almost 200-year history. So that's it for the overview of the dam, the history of the dam. We're going to start now getting into why we need to do this project, and then eventually what the scope of the project is. So kind of some more high-level bullet point type drivers, and I'll hit kind of on each one of these in the ensuing slides. But let me just walk through them here. You know, public safety is number one. We were here 4.5 years ago. The mayor kind of talked about why there's a downstream population at risk from this dam. Any dam poses a degree of risk, right, out there, and that's no different here. Right, I touched on that already. So risk reduction, downstream consequences, longevity. We saw the governor's press release. We've heard some stories already. You know, we're looking to maintain this asset really for public benefit. That's a big driver here. Resilience, I'll touch on the current standards and the evolution of engineering over the past 200 years. But we're trying to get to this level of resilience that's adequate, that will provide public safety, it'll provide that risk reduction, and kind of what our guiding regulations and current standards are. Related to this, we mention a lot nowadays, we're trying to get to this state of good repair. So that allows us really to get to an acceptable level to operate and maintain this dam. So Joe's guys, you know, we're not in a reactive mode, but we're in a good state of repair, and we're able to operate this thing well. And then, you know, we don't hide behind this. There are deficiencies at the dam. I'll walk through those. And that's obviously a driver here too. So I touched on this already, but there's kind of two sides to this. Just as the use of the reservoir has evolved, as originally feeding the Shenango Canal, you know, so has engineering, so has the industry of dam safety, so has our understanding of public safety and risk. So this is just a shot on your left of the original specifications that these reservoirs were built to, and it's pretty interesting to read some of the verbiage there. And again, we've evolved to more modern day standards, and in New York, really we're governed by and what we're aiming to be in line with are the DEC guidelines for the design of dams and just other industry standards here. So that's what we're going for. But I think the point is, like, it really should come as no surprise to anyone that buildings are built differently than they were 200 years ago, and it's really no different than dams. So things have evolved. The hazard classification and the condition of the dam. So in New York State and really anywhere in the country, dams are classified. They're classified due to their consequences of failure. So DEC has classified Madison Reservoir Dam as a high hazard dam. So what does that mean? A dam failure would result in widespread or serious damage to homes, damage to infrastructure, important utilities, or substantial environmental damage, such that loss of human life or widespread substantial economic loss is likely. Right, it's obvious we do have some homes, we have the village downstream of the dam. Important thing on the classification of the dam versus the condition, they're somewhat two different things. The hazard class of a dam, again, is an indication of the estimated consequences if the dam were to fail. It is not necessarily an indication of the condition of the dam. So dams are regulated structure. We follow DEC guidelines. Recently, we've been out there very frequently doing inspections and monitoring. We're required to do biannual and annual inspections. DEC comes out to inspect this dam biannually, so it's regularly monitored and it's regularly inspected. Again, we're just very upfront about some of these condition ratings, but in the most recent DEC inspection, the dam was rated unsound, deficiencies recognized. And I'll touch a little more on some of these deficiencies, but they noted inadequate slope stability, so that's looking at the structural stability of the embankments, and that's really under some, I'll say, unique loading conditions. The spillway has inadequate capacity. Again, this is through the lens of modern day standards. I want to make that clear again. Low-level outlets have a limiting capacity. There's some seepage. Seepage is normal, really, in any dam, especially in earth and embankment dams. We do have some points of seepage that we regularly monitor. In kind of their last point, rehab is needed to bring the dam into conformance with applicable dam safety criteria. Last bullet here is important, and Joe mentioned this already, thank you. The dam is not at risk of imminent failure. I'll say it again, it's not at risk of imminent failure. If it were, we would be doing things much differently right now. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, and this is not an all-encompassing slide here, but these are some of the primary deficiencies. But I think it's important again to remember the age of the dam, when it last underwent a rehab, and right, just the fact that dams are man-made structures and they require upgrade. So I'll walk through each one. Number one, the spillway. Again, looking at modern day standards, it does not meet the current capacity requirements. The embankments, these are the earthen embankments, they're very steep. Compared to modern standards, they're somewhat irregular. They kind of undulate. You've probably seen it from the road. Related to the embankments, again, the crest, so that's the top portion of the dam. It's very narrow. Again, compared to modern day standards, the crests are narrow. The low-level outlets, there's kind of a series of issues. The important one is the drawdown capacity. The current DEC standard is to be able to bring your reservoir down to the 90% volume level in 14 days. The capacity we have right now is closer to 29 days. I'll make one point that's not unique really to this dam. Many dams of this area, they're in the same situation where they do not have sufficient drawdown capacity. The controls of the low-level outlets, they're at the downstream side at the valve house, so the pipes are fully charged, they're under full pressure through the dam. They're old, the pipes are old, right? They're original cast iron pipes, they're very old. And then we do have some seepage that shows itself at this valve house. The auxiliary spillway, again, that's a very old structure. It's just deteriorated. The value that it adds as a spillway really isn't there when you look at the condition that it's in overall. The service spillway, again, we did some repairs not too long ago, back in March. There are some issues with that spillway as well. This is the one in the middle, the concrete spillway. And then we also have a seepage point at the left embankment toe where there used to be a tunnel that served as an additional outlet from the dam that we're monitoring too. So this is kind of the last slide, I guess, for our current conditions. But this really shows, it shows a lot, I think, and it's important to illustrate where we're at right now. But what we're looking at, that blue line, you see it labeled actual reservoir level. So it's just what it says. It shows the reservoir level over time, the level on the y-axis, time on the bottom, on the x-axis. And this is over the past few months, back in March. So if you look at the first box that's labeled March, we brought the reservoir down to do these repairs to the spillway. You know, there were some deficiencies noted at the spillway. We decided internally that we had to address these. It couldn't wait for the rehab project, right? We had to do something sooner than later. So we had to bring the reservoir down, get it below the spillway to make these repairs. That's what that first one is. Somewhat planned, right? But not really. Fast forward to May. This is probably in recent memory for many of the folks on the reservoir. The seepage that we have at the left embankment toe from that old tunnel, again, that's always been there, but it in a general sense, it started showing itself in a way that it hadn't before. It appeared that it may have been increasing. It was roiling somewhat. In the end, I don't think, we don't think things really were that much different, but as a dam owner, you always, you know, you have to think of what's downstream, you have to think of the downstream consequences, and you really have to be overly safe. So what did we do? You know, we had to bring the reservoir down. We had to do it without much notice because this showed itself somewhat out of the blue, right? So that's what that box near Memorial Day shows. We started dropping the reservoir. And ultimately, we brought it down about 18 inches, and things started to calm down. At that point, we shut the valves off. We didn't shut them off. We throttled them back, and we brought the reservoir back to that normal summertime level. But, you know, like I'll say bluntly, we take no pleasure in doing this. This isn't something we wanted to do at all, but this is where we're at with the dam right now, right? Like, we're really in a reactive mode. Things pop up, we have to take action, and there's really no way around that. So, like, ultimately, and the point here is justifying really the need for this project. We can't continue like this, right? If we do, you're looking at more situations like this. What we want to get to is the state of good repair. We've got a good handle. We're able to operate and maintain this thing, and we don't have to do this. Okay, so shifting to the rehab project. Again, we're in design right now. Design's not complete. We have a really good picture of what the project is going to entail at a high level and what the primary components are. But I'll just say not everything is figured out quite yet, but we'll share what we can. So again, kind of some of these high level things. What's our approach for the project? What are our goals? Simply put, we're going to address all the deficiencies that we're aware of at this point. What's going to guide our design really are the New York State DEC guidelines and current industry standards. And as I just mentioned, we're going to get to that state of good repair. So I'm going to walk through the major project components really at this point. And again, they could change. But a lot of these really, they mimic the deficiencies, right? So first one, you know, just due to the condition of the spillway, due to its capacity issues, that spillway is going to be completely replaced. The existing one will be demolished, and we're going to build a new spillway. That's a big part of the project. It's a big part of the schedule of the project as well. The aux spillway, that's basically, it's going to be abandoned. Again, it doesn't really offer any value. It's just more of a risk to us at this point. So it'll be blocked off. It'll be abandoned in place, essentially. We'll have a new low-level outlet system, so new pipelines, a new intake structure, a new valve house, and a new exit channel as well. That's another really big part of the project. The embankments, you know, simply put, they're going to get upgraded, they're going to get regraded, a lot of fill is going to be moved in, drainage features are going to be put in place to collect any seepage through the dam, bring it to a point that we can monitor it, and just kind of as those yellow circles indicate, it's really going to be across the entire embankments. The crest will also be widened. The tunnel, it's tough to tell on here, but we're going to, you know, the tunnel was somewhat abandoned in the 80s. We're going to do some more work to abandon it better, I guess, and also collect and, and monitor the seepage that persists through the tunnel. Not shown in yellow circles, but number 6, just in general, some site improvements. You know, there are some trees that need to be cleared really on the periphery of the dam. Some site security improvements, so think like fencing, gates, stuff like that, and just new access ways across the dam so the maintenance guys can do their thing. Number 7, enhanced monitoring, so there'll be more instrumentation, again, that really give us a good remote look, good eyes and ears on the dam. And the last point here, in some of the conversations we've had already, we got asked this, and I think it was somewhat obvious to us, but I wanted to mention it here. The current reservoir pool level, it's 1211. There's going to be no change to that. Okay, so the level that the reservoir is maintained at now, that will still be the reservoir level after this project. So that's an important point to get out there. Actually, before I leave that, like when you look at this, there's a lot of yellow, right? The work's going to be going on across the entire site. And that, you know, that's the other point of this. This is a big project. It's a big, big project. So again, this is a major construction project. There will be work across the entire site, and actually within the reservoir on the inboard slopes at the dam. But this is heavy civil and marine construction, you know, in general earthwork. There's going to be pipeline work, demolition of the original spillway, a lot of concrete work for the new spillway and some new structures. It's multi-year, multi-phase. You know, this is a big, big project. Right now, we're anticipating 2 years for the construction of the major project components. It's a big project. The picture here, it shows actually the Derider Dam rehab that was done a few years back. And again, what you see there is work across the entire site. This project, in terms of magnitude and scale, it's somewhat bigger than that project. We're building a completely new spillway. That's a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time. Derider, fortunate for that reservoir, that was not required. So, you know, Jackie mentioned it, the mayor and Supervisor Reuter mentioned it. You're going to feel impacts from this project. You're going to see impacts from this project. There's no way around it, but, you know, the project is necessary. What you're probably going to feel and see the most comes down to the drawdown of the reservoir that's going to be required to complete the work. So when we're, you know, a dam, again, a dam's a man-made structure, but when is it in its most vulnerable state? It's really when we're doing something like this. You know, when we demolish that existing spillway, we're going to be without a spillway, right? We're not going to have the ability to pass flows in an engineered fashion. So we're in a very vulnerable state. So we have to control, in engineering terms, we call this control of water. But we have to manage the flows into the reservoir. We can't stop Mother Nature, right? Payne Brook is going to keep flowing. We have to pass that. Right. So a drawdown is going to be required. I'm going to kind of walk through the basis for that now. But they're impacts, right? And we've categorized these impacts into some various categories, and I'm going to talk through some of these. But first and foremost, again, public safety is impacted by the construction project and the drawdown. The risk of the project, the cost of the project, the safety of the project, that's kind of lumped into construction risk. And then obviously folks that are on the reservoir, folks that fish in the reservoir, people that use the reservoir, they're going to be impacted too. And there are also some environmental impacts. So before we get to that, I'm going to kind of walk through these slides here, but it's just as the title says, why is a reservoir drawdown required? And it kind of somewhat comes down to 2 points. One I already touched on. The existing spillway is going to be demolished, and we're going to have to build a new spillway. So just as it says, during that time, we will have no means to pass flow via spillway. So we have to manage that with the drawdown. So just looking at the sketch here, this is a simplified illustration of the dam embankment in the reservoir, and it shows kind of the typical condition. But what the drawdown does, that's indicated by the yellow line, it essentially gives us a buffer zone, right? So it provides storage capacity. So if we do get a significant storm when we're in construction, we've got that level of storage within the reservoir, and we can take that inflow. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to pass that flow. You'd risk essentially, ultimately, or in worst case scenario, you could risk losing the dam. And again, it's in its very vulnerable state that can't be minimized. That can't be minimized at all. So we need that buffer. We need that storage capacity that the drawdown will provide. The second part, there's a lot of improvements that are going to be done to the embankments. So completely regrading, a lot of fill. There's going to be some significant excavations within the embankments to install drainage features and other things. So we have to dig. We have to dig into the dam, right? And that's an alarming thing to do, to dig into a dam. It's a really concerning thing to do, certainly when a dam is full. And simply put, we can't dig into our dam when it's at its normal level. So it's a bit technical. I'll do my best to explain it, but you can see the reservoir, it's at that blue, that water level, but any earthen embankment dam, there's essentially a zone within the embankment that's saturated, and that's typical of any earthen embankment dam. So that's indicated, that blue line, that kind of meanders its way down through the slope. So what you're seeing there is, somewhat where that line would be at the normal condition, and what the yellow circle shows with the red outline is indicative of the excavation and the earthwork that we're going to have to do within the embankment. So we can't do that, right? What's shown there, we can't do that. We can't dig into that saturated zone of the dam. There's no way around that. We bring the reservoir down, again, hopefully it popped up here. That's going to drop that saturated zone in the embankment. That embankment's going to take some time to dry out, but that allows us to do the work that we have to do. So these are the two main reasons that a drawdown is required. And again, there's really no way around that for us to do this work safely, as it shows here. So I'm going to talk now about some of the impacts and how we've categorized them and how we evaluated them. This listing here, again, is by no means all-encompassing, but these are some of the ones that are the major impacts. A lot of these are pretty obvious, but I'm going to talk through each of them and then how we had to balance them and where we arrived to. So community and reservoir user impacts, again, it's pretty obvious here, but the shoreline is going to be impacted. The islands, access to those is going to be impacted by this drawdown. Recreation will somewhat be impacted. The boating and the water sports, swimming, fishing, ice fishing, all those activities can still occur, but at this lower level, they're going to be impacted to some degree. Docks and the boat launch, obviously, they're going to be impacted from where y'all probably normally keep them. water use, I'll talk about the survey we did back in the spring, but potentially there could be impacts to folks that have shallow intakes from the reservoir and wells as well, or direct withdrawals. Environmental impacts, you know, potentially there's impacts to fish, aquatic life, and vegetation. The reservoir outflow, again, the flow through Payne Brook, we have to maintain that. We have ways we can maintain that, so we'll always maintain flow through Payne Brook. Some of the wetland areas, they could be altered to some degree during this drawdown period. But on the flip side, right, we have public safety that's impacted by this drawdown and this construction project. And we have what we're calling construction risk. So safety, workers at the site, you know, they're impacted by how we do this drawdown. And the village and all the downstream residents, they're also impacted by this as well. That really, I cannot understate that enough. The drawdown level and how we go about it also has major implications for the schedule of the project, really the complexity of the project, simply put, and the cost. It's a big driver for each one of these. So I'll take a moment here that thank you for everybody that did respond to our survey. It really helped us, you know, look at some of these impacts and balance these impacts. And we really took a lot of this to heart. It took a lot of thought. Our engineering team, as Joe had kind of mentioned, they've been working diligently. This has been a very thorough process that we've gone to, and I'll get to the details of the drawdown here. But the map shows essentially our survey response. Some of the lines that are in the middle of the reservoir, they're not people that were floating around in the reservoir, but they didn't give us an address, which is fine. So we just lumped them we put them right in the reservoir. But you can see we had I think around 114 respondents total, which I think is great. And you can see we did have really good representation across the entire reservoir. So thank you all again for that. So I'm going to kind of walk through now how we went about balancing the impacts. Again, we recognize there's impacts from this drawdown, and how did we determine the level that we need to get to safely complete this work and really minimize any adverse impacts to the community and the environment. So just to talk through this graphic here, it's a simplified illustration of the analysis that we went through. But on the vertical axis or the y-axis is essentially project impact and risk, and on the x-axis or on the bottom, you can consider that the drawdown level or the reservoir level. So at normal pool, no drawdown, pretty obvious here, right? There's really no impact. There's minimal impact to the community. There's no change in conditions, right? At the other extreme, we get to a complete dewatering situation. You're really feeling that, right? That's when the impacts are really at the highest. Conversely to that, it's essentially the opposite. And this is pretty obvious stuff here, but I think it's just good to look at it in this fashion. So if we did no drawdown, right? If we left the reservoir at the normal pool elevation, we're at the highest risk level. We're really in an unsafe condition concerning downstream risk to public safety risk, also at the site. And we're also adding really unwarranted and unmanageable risk to the construction of the project. And again, at the other extreme, a complete dewatering, that obviously reduces our risk on that end of the spectrum to the minimum. So what we had to do, you know, looking at the results from the survey, our engineers looking at really what has to be done at the project, looking at where we have to get to drop that saturated zone in the embankment, to drop that level, to get that storage capacity, that buffer within the reservoir. They considered all that. They balanced all these impacts. And this is where we've gotten to, you know, simply put. So a 10-foot drawdown is going to be required for the 2-year duration of the construction of the major project components. So again, it's 10 feet That's where we've gotten to. That's what's required, and that's going to be for the 2-year duration of the major construction, the major project components. And again, I can't state it enough, but public safety here really is paramount. It's ultimately paramount. We recognize you're going to feel it at the reservoir. You're going to be impacted how you use the reservoir, but there are real consequences if we don't thoughtfully consider this and take this seriously downstream. Public safety is paramount here. So this, I know this is a lot to take in right now, but this is a rendering of what the reservoir, may look like at the 10-foot drawdown level. This is based on the most recent bathymetry, so the underwater topography, the underwater lay of the land of the reservoir. But it gives you some sense of what it's going to look like. It gives you some sense of how, impacts are going to vary to folks on the reservoir. And again, it's kind of unique really to where you are. I'll pause here for a minute. This image is going to stay up on the ensuing slide, so I'm going to keep moving here. Right, so we kind of established why we had to get to that 10-foot level. We got some really good questions from the Lake Association and from Greg as well. Well, why is this going to take 2 years, right? Like, that's a big obvious question here too. I'll caveat this now. A lot of this is still in development, but this is somewhat a preliminary sequence of the major project components. So it isn't necessarily stepwise as it's shown here. Not everything, the first thing doesn't have to be done before the next thing is done. That is the case for some components of the project. We have to get really our low-level outlet system before we really can start abandoning our spillway. But this is kind of a first glance at what the sequence of the project might look like. So these are the major components of the project. So you start putting durations to these components, right? And that's what I just popped up there. Again, this is very preliminary. And then you look at what some of these major timelines are for these major parts, and a couple rise to the surface. The siphon, the new low-level outlet system, that's going to take some time. These are new pipelines. They're going in and out of the reservoir. That's a 6-month duration. The embankment improvements are long duration work items. And the spillway, you can see that there at 12 months. That's really a big component of the project. That's going to take some time to do. So to take it a step further, what I just highlighted, what components require the reservoir to be drawn down, and that's what's highlighted here. So you can see it's a significant amount of the work. It has to be done with the reservoir drawn down. This is still we're very early on in design. Some of this will change, but it gives you some perception, some concept of what we're looking at in terms of the scope of the project and why the drawdown is required. So what to expect, and in some ways you might want to start thinking about to prepare. I think a lot of this is obvious. Again, this list is not by any means all encompassing, but just some high level points here. Again, one more time, the drawdown, the level, we're at a 10-foot level, so that's below the normal pool or the current spillway crest. Our spillway is elevation 1211. We're going to get 10 feet below that. That's elevation 1201, just as it says here. The duration, it's 2 complete years. Right now, I'll get to the schedule, but right now we're anticipating construction starting in 2026 and 2027. That's for the major project components, and the drawdown, we need to plan for that occurring for that full 2 years at this point. Prepare. Again, this is not all-encompassing, but we learned from the survey there are at least a couple dozen folks out there on the reservoir where they have very shallow wells or they have a shallow intake. Some at a level shallower than this 10-foot drawdown level. So you should start it's pretty obvious, but start planning accordingly, right? Investigate the reliability of your water source and take action that you might need to. And that's a different decision, I think, individually. It depends on where your well is. It depends on how you want to go through this time period during construction. So that's somewhat of an individual decision. Another point I'll make here, this is an old dam. It's an old structure. When we get into construction, we could get into a situation we call as engineers unforeseen conditions. And we will, just as we did back this spring, we have to respond accordingly. So what that means, if we find something or we get into something that isn't going well, it sometimes does, unfortunately, in construction, there's always the potential that we'd have to lower the reservoir further. That condition exists during construction. It really exists at any point in time. It's somewhat crude to say, but there is no level that's ever really permanently guaranteed at the reservoir. It is a dam. We have to manage it. We have to manage risks to public safety. So that's something to think about, the reliability of your water source. There's obvious impacts to the shoreline and access. Boats and docks will be impacted, but the reservoir still will be usable to some degree. On the positive side, right, like any challenge, also, it presents opportunity, and that's no different here. It really isn't. This is a unique moment in time. Some of us have described it as a once-in-a-generation type opportunity. These are individual decisions as well, but we've heard some folks already. They're already planning to do shoreline improvements to really take advantage of this drawdown period. And the last bullet here, Madison County, they're planning to take advantage of this drawdown period to do a couple culvert replacements. One is the culvert actually on the Causeway Road by the boat launch. They're planning to replace that during this period. So there is opportunity in this hardship time. We're almost there. So just the high-level schedule at this point, again, is Jackie noted, we're still very preliminary here. So when we talk about schedule, we're really just talking about in years. So right now, 2024, we're in design. We're planning to substantially complete design this year. Looking to next year, again, we'll complete design. We'll get into the permitting process for this project. We have to follow, all permitting and regulatory review and approvals in that sense. We're also planning to put the project out for bidding for construction next year. It's a significant project. It's a significant dollar value, and it will take some time to get that authorized on our end. Shifting to 2026 and 2027, that's when we're planning to get into construction. So just as it says there, this is for the major project components, and that's also going to, that's when the drawdown is needed. So all of 2026, all of 2027. Getting to 2028, this is a big project. I've said it many times now, but work will continue into 2028. It'll mainly be final site restoration type stuff, cleanup type stuff, commissioning of the dam, getting things up and running. There still will be activity, for 3 years out into 2028. But we should wrap up in 2028. The last bullet there, the reservoir, we are anticipating bringing it back to the normal pool level in that final year of construction in 2028. So it's been a lot to go through. I appreciate the patience here. That wraps up my portion of the project. When will you hear from us again? Yep, so as Jackie mentioned, we are planning to do some additional public information sessions just like this. We want to stay in touch. We want to keep everybody informed as things move along, and we will do that. The timeline for those dates aren't set yet, but they will be forthcoming. We have a project website it's close to being launched now. That's really going to be our main outlet for sharing information. So any updates, a lot of the information you got from this presentation, we'll probably actually put the presentation online, share the recording, the fact sheet will be on there. A lot of that info will be on the website. And lastly, right, if you do have questions, comments, concerns, absolutely please reach out to Jackie. And lastly, thank you. Thank you all.